The Secret Garden, Chapter 5, Dickon. The sun shone down steadily in the week that followed. Mary learned that Mr. Craven should not be returning to Misselthwaite Manor for some time, as he had gone on from London to travel in foreign lands. There would be no chance now of his discovering that she spent all her days in the secret garden. No chance of his becoming angry with her and locking up the garden forever. He would not be back until the autumn, Martha had told her, and so, without telling a soul, Mary claimed the garden as her own, with no fear that Mr. Craven would take it away from her. She worked and dug and pulled up weeds, becoming more pleased with her work with every passing day. It had been almost a month since Mary had come to Misselthwaite Manor, and she was becoming fatter and healthier and happier than she had ever been. She loved to be out of doors, where she felt as alive as the pale green points that sprouted all over the secret garden in the nice, clear places that Mary had made for them. There was a laurel-hedged walk which curved around the secret garden and ended at a gate that opened into a wood. One day she thought she would skip around this walk and look into the wood and see if there were any rabbits hopping about. When she reached the little gate, she opened it and went through because she heard a low, peculiar whistling sound and wanted to find out what it was. It was a very strange thing indeed. She quite caught her breath as she stopped to look at it. A boy was sitting under a tree with his back against it, playing on a rough wooden pipe. He was a funny-looking boy, about 12. On the trunk of the tree he leaned against, a brown squirrel was clinging and watching him, and quite near him were two rabbits sitting up and sniffing with tremulous noses, and actually it appeared as if they were all drawing near to watch him and listen to the strange call of his pipe. When he saw Mary, he held up his hand and spoke to her in a low voice. "Don't thou move," he said. "It'd flight 'em." He stopped playing his pipe and rose slowly from the ground. The squirrel scampered back up into the branches of the tree, and the rabbits dropped on all fours and hopped away, though not at all as if they were frightened. "I'm Dickon," the boy said. "I know thou art Miss Mary. I've got the garden tools and the seeds." He spoke to her as if he knew her quite well, but because she felt rather shy, Mary spoke to him a little stiffly. "Will you show the seeds to me?" she asked. They sat on a log, and Dickon began to explain the various kinds of seeds to her. She wished she could talk as he did. His speech was so quick and easy. Suddenly he stopped and turned his head. "Where's that robin as is callin' us?" he said. The chirp came from a thick holly bush, bright with scarlet berries, and Mary thought she knew whose call it was. "Is he really calling us?" she asked. "Aye," said Dickon. "He's calling someone he's friends with." "I think he knows me a little," Mary said. "Aye, he knows thee," said Dickon quietly, "and he likes thee." "Do you think he really likes me?" cried Mary eagerly. "He wouldn't come near thee if he didn't," answered Dickon. "Do you understand everything birds say?" Dickon's grin spread until he seemed all wide, red, curving mouth, and he rubbed his rough head. "I think I do, and they think I do," he said. "I've lived on the moor with 'em so long. Sometimes I think perhaps I'm a bird, or a fox, or a rabbit, or a squirrel, or even a beetle, and I don't know it." He laughed and began to talk about the flower seeds again. He told Mary what they looked like when they were flowers. He told her how to plant them, and watch them, and feed them, and water them. "See here," he said, turning around to look at her. "I'll plant them for thee myself. Where is thy garden?" Mary's thin hands clutched each other as they lay on her lap. "I don't know anything about boys," she said slowly. "Could you keep a secret if I told you one? It's a great secret." "I'm keeping secrets all the time," Dickon answered. Mary did not mean to put out her hand and clutch his sleeve, but she did it. "I've stolen a garden," she said very fast. "Nobody wants it. Nobody cares for it. Nobody ever goes into it. Perhaps everything in it is dead already. I don't know. Nobody has any right to take it from me when I care about it, and they don't. They're letting it die, all shut in by itself," she ended passionately, and she burst out crying. Dickon's blue eyes grew rounder and rounder. "Where is it?" he asked in a voice both curious and full of sympathy. Mary got up from the log at once. "Come with me and I'll show you," she said. She led him around the laurel path and to the walk where the ivy grew so thickly. "It's this," Mary said as she stepped to the wall and lifted the hanging ivy. "It's a secret garden, and I'm the only one in the world who wants it to be alive." They passed in together. Dickon looked around and around about it, and around again. "Eh?" he almost whispered. "It's a queer, pretty place. It's like as if a body was in a dream. I never thought I'd see it." "Did you know about it?" asked Mary. Martha told me there was one garden as no one ever went inside," he answered. "Us used to wonder what it was like." "Will there be roses?" Mary whispered. "Can you tell? I thought perhaps they were all dead." "Eh, no, not them, not all of 'em," he said. "They're as wick as you or me." Mary remembered that Martha had told her that wick meant alive. "I'm glad they're wick," she whispered fiercely. "I want them all to be wick. Let us go round the garden and count how many wick ones there are." They went from bush to bush and from tree to tree. Dickon cut the dry and dead wood away and showed Mary how to tell when an unpromising bough or twig still had green life in it. In no time at all they were using the new tools to dig and weed and cut away the dead wood to make room for the living. "There'll be a fountain of roses here this summer," Dickon proclaimed quite suddenly, and then he cried, "Why, who did that there?" He was pointing to one of Mary's own little clearings around the pale green points. "I did it," said Mary. Dickon went and knelt down by them, smiling his wide smile. "Thou did right," he said. "A gardener couldn't have told thee better. They'll grow now like Jack's beanstalk. They're crocuses and snowdrops, and these here is daffydowndillies. They will be a sight." They worked and talked the entire afternoon, and soon they heard the big clock in the courtyard strike the hour, and it was time for Mary to go in. "There's a lot more work to do here," Dickon said, admiring all they had done. "Will you come again and help me do it?" Mary asked. "I'll come every day if thou wants me," he answered stoutly. "It's the best fun I ever had in my life, shut in here and waking up a garden." "Dickon," Mary said, "you are as nice as Martha said you were. I like you, and you make the third person. I never thought I should like 3 people." "Only 3 folk as thou likes," he said. "Who is the other 2? "Martha and the robin." Dickon laughed. "I know thou thinks I'm a queer lad," he said, "but I think thou art the queerest little lass I ever saw." Then Mary did a strange thing. She leaned forward and asked Dickon a question she had never dreamed of asking anyone before, and she tried to ask it in Yorkshire dialect because that was his language, and in India a native always was pleased if you knew his speech. "Dost thou like me?" she asked. "Eh," he answered heartily, "that I does. I likes thee wonderful, and so does the robin, I do believe." "That's 2 then," said Mary. "That's 2 for me. I shall have to go now," she added mournfully. "Whatever happens, you never would tell about the garden, not even Martha. If thou was a missel thrush and showed me where thy nest was, does thou think I'd tell anyone? Not me," he said. "Thou art as safe as a missel thrush." And she was quite sure she was.